WisconsinEye is previewing Governor Scott Walker's 8th State of the State message, but I need help. Charles Franklin, the director of the Marquette University Law School poll, a veteran pollster, former UW-Madison political science professor, has joined me. Charles, welcome back. And as always, my very good friend, J.R. Ross, editor of WisPolitics. Before we preview this, J.R., you just got some last-minute information on the governor who's got a tax credit in there that we didn't know about. Talk about it.
I caution that I haven't seen it in black and white yet.
None of us have.
This is a briefing from the governor's office. But what Governor Walker is basically trying to do is send taxpayers a check, parent taxpayers a check in an election year. We've seen this before, 2000, I believe, or something similar. But what's different is what they're essentially saying, and again, I haven't seen it in black and white yet, is that if you were a parent, had a kid in 2017, DOR would notify you this spring and say, hey, you may be eligible for this money. Then go to a state website between, I believe, May 15th and June 30th, plug in how many kids you had in your information, presto, you get a check the summer before an election. Now, going forward, it would be a tax credit on your income taxes per child.
Yeah. So
this way you get money in their hands right now, it'd be $100 per kid, $122 million for the credit itself, 671,000 households, according to the Walker administration, and the credit becomes income taxes going forward.
So you've got two boys. You could get a check for $200. And oh, by the way, that's before the November election for governor.
And I would assume you'll hear Walker talk about how it's paid for by dividend, the reform dividend.
Yeah.
We saw the surplus that we're projected to have at the end of the budget go up to $387 million in change. That's a boost of about $138 million. So you start adding it up, you take the 122 off of that. $50 million this morning for a rural development initiative.
Rural economic development.
There's $80 million he wants to do for Lincoln Hills, that's borrowing. And so all kinds of little things. We haven't seen the tally yet for the welfare package, but he's gradually eating up that surplus to kind of do more things ahead of the election.
Charles, how many of those $100 checks would you stand to get?
I get one.
You get one.
Thanks to my daughter. So I'll be sure and pass it on to her.
Does it surprise you in anything in this new child tax credit?
Just that it's so sudden and ad hoc that it's handing voters money, as opposed to diverting that money to schools, for example, or using it to cover some of our shortfalls in transportation and other things. Clearly this and the rural development proposal and so on are adding expenditures after the budget was passed last year. And in that, I think we're seeing some add-ons for popular things. Rural development is popular. Tax refunds is popular.
I'm going to go back to JR in the process. Now, this legislature is only going to be in session 5 or 6 more days. Does he want all these things, part of which that Charles just listed, passed now?
He's asking them to do it. Now, whether they will is up in the air. One thing about this credit is interesting is I think they learned a lesson from 2014. Remember, we had a surplus that kind of bumped up that year.
Yeah.
They did a buy down the property tax levy for tech colleges. The idea was that they would do that, and they read the holding tables too, I think, is part of that. But what Republicans realized was there wasn't a noticeable bump to the taxpayer in that year. Now, granted, they got more money eventually, or property taxes went down, but not until after the election did they notice the big dump in the property taxes, right? This is maybe a way to address that lesson from 2014 of, hey, if you've got the money, you give it to them, do it up front so they see it, and you can see evidence of something's happening. The other thing was like what Charles said about these kind of ad hoc approach. I talked to somebody today, Walker, on the square, and said, look, there is a shotgun approach right now with Scott Walker to what he's doing because they saw what happened in the 10th Senate District last week and went, okay, wait, we're losing suburban educated women. What do we do for them? Healthcare is a major issue for them. That's why you probably saw some, not the only reason, but that maybe something was in the works, and they said, okay, and I'm sure Walker has seen polling before last Tuesday said, there is a number one issue for suburban women, which is health care. How do we address that? That comes up.
Charles, do you agree that the results in Senate District 10 may play into some of these new additional spending programs? This is the same governor who said, wake up call.
I was going to say, I think the wake up call went to the governor's office as well as to party activists. And I think you are seeing this. Now, you were seeing it before the Senate, the special election results as well. with a much bigger emphasis on K-12 funding in the budget last year, as an example.
Up $639 million. That's another number we're going to hear in the speech.
We sure are. And contrast it with the furor over the original proposal for cuts in the 2015 proposal.
Right.
So you've seen that kind of movement. I'd throw one more thing out, and JR alluded to this, is the difference between a tax cut that you only discover when you fill out your tax returns, and where it may be fairly obscure, versus sending someone a check in the mail. The one caveat here is only about 28% of registered voters in the state have children. And so it would be an interesting question about what the other 72% feel about that. Is it great for my kids who have my grandkids?
That's right.
Or where's mine?
Because you can deliver this tax relief in basically three ways: through a deduction, through a credit, or send the check in the mail. I want to ask a question. We asked our viewers on Facebook for a question, so here's a question from Greg F. Is this State of the State the official start of the governor's re-election campaign, Charles?
It is certainly the layout of taking credit for everything good, proposing things that people like, and these details that even now we're finding out add a little bit to that. It'll be interesting to see how long this is compared to the very short 2015 State of the State, which didn't propose much new and was remarkably short.
JR, how do you answer Greg's question?
He's queuing up the election. I mean, he officially launched in November, right? We've known he's been running for months before that. This is part of the process. Every governor that I've covered uses the State of the State in a odd-numbered year to queue up his budget, and in an even-numbered year to kind of set stage for the election. He's going to talk about 8 years ago. It drives Democrats crazy to hear Jim Doyle's name come off Scott Walker's lips 8 years later. They'll talk about the unemployment rate now versus in 2010. He'll talk about where we're at for job creation. All these things he'll talk about that we don't want to go back to those bad old days. He still uses Doyle as the foil for what he's doing right now.
Yeah, and the quote there from the excerpt that they moved, you're right, there's two references to 8 years ago. 8 years ago, things were not very good in our state. Why does he go back to 8 years ago?
Because it's the bottom of the recession, the national recession, and actually January of 2010, not even the end of the Doyle term, but January 2010 is a good starting point for his narrative because jobs have gone up considerably, unemployment has gone down considerably. The budget that in the midst of a recession was suffering very big deficits is now projecting at least surpluses for the fall. So there's a lot for the governor to make reference to, but any smart politician is going to choose the worst of times before they took office to compare to the best of times.
JR mentioned health care. There's a line in the speech that says, Washington has failed to act. Excuse me, don't Republicans control White House, House, and Senate?
I think the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare and how do these proposals on health care line up with the existing Affordable Care Act and Republican failure to repeal is going to be an interesting part of the speech and of the policy going forward. We saw Obamacare more unpopular than popular here through most of the time, but in the last year, popularity for it has gone up, and most people have said, more people have said, they'd like it kept or improved a little bit rather than repealed and replaced. So what he's proposing here is trying to address health care, claim credit for making it better, but doing it within the context of the Affordable Care Act is not going anywhere.
Charles, drawing on your years of polling, two questions. What themes, what subjects does the governor want to hit in this speech? And then obviously, question two, what do you think he might want to avoid?
I think claiming credit is clearly the first thing, and that unemployment rate is really very impressive.
3%.
3%.
Since we've scored it.
Remarkably low, far down from the depths of the recession in 2010. And so naturally, he should point to that as a real success. I think he's also going to talk about K-12 education, ignoring the earlier cuts that came in the first term and focusing on the changes in the budget last year. Foxconn will be one of the things to listen for. How much does he emphasize or not? He owns that issue, but the polling doesn't seem like it's playing that well statewide, and maybe even not all that well in the Milwaukee area.
And JR, the line in the excerpts already moved from the governor's office makes a oblique reference to Foxconn. We made the single largest investment in a company. Doesn't mention Foxconn. Do you think he uses the F word, Foxconn word?
It'll be interesting. I think he's a little caught either way. When he gave his original announcement speech in November, I guess it was, as I recall, he did not explicitly mention Foxconn, and people commented on that. Then he worked it into subsequent speeches. So I think the issue here is no reference more attention-getting than a passing reference, or, for that matter, a full-throated defense of the policy?
Are we going to hear the word Foxconn?
Oh, sure. I don't think
in the speech.
I don't think he
will.
I don't know if he can run away from it. I mean, for Walker, he like Charles says, he owns it, so he's going to sell it as, Wisconsin Valley, a transformational opportunity for the economy. I mean, using his words. So for him, I don't know. I mean, just guessing. I don't know what the benefit is of trying to distance yourself from that. It's like Democrats with Obamacare. I mean, you own it no matter what. So if you run away from it, you're going to get tagged with it in an election. So if you embrace it and say, these are the good things, it may help you a little bit in that regard. But we'll see. I don't think that's going to be the focus of the speech. Walker's made clear the things we're talking about. Let's talk about health care, this three-pronged attack he announced. We'll talk about your property tax bill in 2010 versus 2018. He's going to talk about this new initiative. All the good things he wants to talk about. I think Foxconn fits into the narrative of we are changing the economy, using Walker's kind of perspective, to create opportunities, which fits in with the welfare package, right? Which is also red meat for the base of you get people off of welfare into the workforce to fill all these great jobs we have. Again, I think that's the Walker kind of mentality going into this.
The issue of changes to the welfare system. He wants a higher 30-hour work mandate to receive food stamps. He wants work, in some cases, for Medicaid, and he wants to drug test. What has been the response in your polls to those issues?
Some of these are new, some of the work requirements, but when drug testing was first proposed a few years ago, we did ask about it, and more people supported drug testing than opposed it. So it's a fairly popular issue. Whether that carries over to work requirements, I don't know. We haven't asked about that. But I think the track record of other kinds of policies to put pressure on recipients of aid in return for that aid has shown up as positive. I think there's a little bit of a conflict here with the emphasis on health care and whether he talks about it or not, opioids, in that some of this pressure affects eligibility for health care benefits. And so you have a little bit of a conflict between taking people off of the health care that might help them with their drug addiction and getting them ready for the workforce. So I think that's an important part. A side issue is, how are we ever going to evaluate these things? Do these policies have built into them an assessment of whether they produce benefits, more people getting into the workforce that weren't on there, or are these more symbolic that actually won't affect that many people? Without an assessment of it built into the policy, it's going to be hard to
Charles,
know.
I want you to frame up Governor Scott Walker in two ways. Number one, right track, wrong track, your last polls, number one, and number two, his personal approval rating. Give us your perspective.
And there's a little bit of a contrast there. On the right track, wrong track, during 2015, early 2016, wrong track was higher than right direction. So that did 15 and 16. Didn't look so good. But in our late 2016 and throughout 2017 through June of last year, the last time we polled statewide, right direction had moved up into the mid-50s. Wrong track had fallen into the mid to low 40s. So we do seem to see an improvement in the perception of the direction of the state over the past year and a half, say. The governor's job approval, as well as his personal favorability, but they track pretty closely together, had been a little bit net positive through the 2014 re-election since the recall. But in 2015 took a real knock. His approval fell to a low of 37% approval in September of 2015 and has stayed in the 40s ever since. In June, we had him at 48. Polls by other pollsters in the state since June have shown it a little worse than that, sort of 44-48 or thereabouts, across 3 or 4 different polls. So it looks like his approval may have, well, certainly has recovered from the low points of 2015 and 16, but maybe not quite up to the high 40s.
And the low point was directly related to his run for president.
It absolutely was.
His base didn't like that, and Wisconsinites at all didn't like that.
We saw that the group that dropped the most in approval of him was actually Republicans who said they wished he hadn't run for president. And that was 34% of Republicans that said that. So it was a big hit. Wished he had not run.
1 in 3.
And now disapproved of the job he's doing. Now, that was a while back, and he's certainly been out touring the state, rebuilding that. Plus, in a partisan election against the Democrats, you would surely expect a lot of those folks to come home. But it does show that he did some damage to his base supporters during that period and needs them to come home, especially in an election year in which the national forces may be favoring Democrats more.
JR, how popular is this governor giving his 8th State of the State in a few minutes?
Good question. I mean, I wish I had more Charles polls to look at.
Yes.
But public opinion strategies.
Can you tell us when the next one will be out?
No, we haven't scheduled it. It'll be out this spring, though.
Public opinion strategies is a Republican firm that's respected and does a lot of work in Wisconsin. I think they had him pretty much even. I've seen public policy polling surveys that have him way underwater. That's an automated poll from a Dem firm. It makes me a little more nervous. But I don't know how popular he is. I like Charles's, even the numbers may be off a little bit. It's the trend that I look for. And so I have a reliable source of numbers to look at. I want to see what that trend is. When I talk to Republicans, they're worried more about the right track, wrong track number. Even Walker's at 48, 47, 47, 48. Because their view is if he's just right around upper 40s, and people feel good about this state, they'll keep him around. If the right track wrong number drops below 50 and he's at 46, then they're worried. But they feel like his ceiling is around, it's been around 52%. So if the right tracks are around that neck of the woods, they feel like that's kind of like a valuable number for where Walker is.
Well, I want to add a question, Facebook question from David O. What is Walker doing about the transportation budget? And I want to hedge it this way. I asked the Wisconsin Policy Forum about transportation debt. And when the governor took office, we issued borrowing bonding, $1.79 billion for transportation, and that rose last fiscal year to $2.21 billion, an increase of 23%. Does the governor have, let me go back to one of my earlier questions, does he not want to talk about transportation funding impasse in this speech?
I think that's a tricky one that he probably would just as soon avoid.
Gloss over.
What we've seen in the polling is contradictory feelings from the public. They don't want to borrow for transportation, but they're also really reluctant to pay more in taxes for it. And so what happens if you're not going to pay taxes and you don't want to cut the construction budget? Usually that ends up by the end of the budget in our polling with more people saying, okay, go ahead and borrow for it. So it's not a win for anybody, but it's also one where the public, which is willing to pay more in taxes for K-12 and a little more willing to pay for health care, even those people that say transportation is their top priority, more people of them are not willing to pay more for it.
But I had a Democratic-leaning barber tell me this morning, I was on the roads near Partyville. They were horrible. How big of a liability is transportation funding, JR?
It's not going to be a focus of today's speech, and part of it is because in Charles's polls, if you look at them, Republicans don't want to raise taxes for roads. It's a base issue for Walker. One, he doesn't want to raise taxes, period. Doesn't want that on his resume. But two, if we are talking about a base-on-base election come November, and I don't know if that's going to be the case yet, I hate predicting 10 months out. But if you need a motivated base, you don't want to do things that are going to make your base unhappy. And raising gas taxes would make Walker's base unhappy.
How many times are we going to hear the words President Trump in this speech?
I'd be surprised if he brings it up. I think this is about things here at home, and I think the advantages of talking about President Trump in this forum are low. But it'll be interesting to see if he does bring it up.
Well, it's a reference tangentially to Washington has failed to act on health care.
The interesting thing of a Republican Congress and a Republican president being the object of criticism from Republican governors, or for that matter, from a Republican president, criticizing his Congress is actually indicative of the fact that people have a pretty bad feeling about how this has worked out, and therefore it's not, I think, much of an advantage to bring it up.
Where do you think President Trump's popularity is in Wisconsin?
Oh,
I know you haven't polled on that recently, but what's your gut tell you?
When we saw it last, he was in the low 40s at a time when the national approval was also in the low 40s. So I would guess he's probably in the high 30s, low 40s right now. The latest national polling has put him back at about 39 or 40% averaged across the polls.
We going to hear the words President Trump?
No, I think Walker's going to try to differentiate Wisconsin from Washington, D.C., that this is a place where things get done, and in Washington they don't. Walker has an issue where he has to, and looking at what happened last Tuesday again, differentiate himself from the national environment of being anti-Trump, or that segment of voters who don't like Trump, separate himself from Trump without alienating the Trump voter, because they still need those folks. If Republicans can find a way to have their suburban Milwaukee base and those folks motivated and bring the new Trump voter out that came out last fall or 2 falls ago, that's a winning combination for them. But if you lose a Trump voter, it makes it harder. And if you lose a suburban voter like we saw in the 10th Senate last week, it makes it very, very difficult. And the trend for Republicans is not good, with educated suburban women who are not happy in Virginia, Alabama, the 10th Senate District now. That's what we're seeing and hearing, which is why, again, the health care thing is big for Walker, because it addresses a big concern for them.
JR, I want to come back to the 10th Senate District special election. Yesterday, Senate Majority Leader Fitzgerald said Representative Jarko was from the wrong part of the district, the north end. Does that sound true to you?
In covering these elections for 18 years, I always hear every district I cover, it's about where the person is from, where the population center is. So that's a part of the equation. That Fitz also said he couldn't say that would have flipped the results of their, and everything I've heard from people about that race was maybe they could have had, a female candidate. Maybe they could have had somebody from a different part of the district. Maybe they could have spent more money, but it's all like 1 or 2 points, not 11. And what we saw was a spread. Now I haven't seen the final certified numbers, but about 11 points between the two. That seems more like an environment-driven result than if Zimmerman was from this part, he would have won the race. I don't know if that's the case.
And I think you emailed me your observation, potentially dangerous sign in the Senate District 10 special election. Why?
I think so, because it was such a large swing. This has been a district
carried that by 17.
17. And in the last 3 or 4 presidential races, it has consistently been between 12 and 17 points or 16 points more Republican than the state as a whole. So this is a solid Republican district. It had an experienced Republican candidate in it, and it swung by 28 points from Trump to the Senate race. So I think that is a big deal. Also, the 58th Assembly District swung by more than 20 points, and that's on the opposite side of the state with a very different electoral environment. So I think you're seeing here maybe immediate short-term national forces that are helping Democrats everywhere. But if so, it was still, those 2 races at least, were more of a pro-Democratic swing than in the 84 other special elections that I've analyzed this year, where the swing has actually only averaged about 8 points. So this is, as the governor put it in the tweet, a wake-up call. The issue is, does this actually act as a harbinger for November? Can these kinds of forces of anything like this magnitude hold through November? We have quite a few assembly seats that Republicans win 55 to 59 points.
Yes.
That wouldn't be enough, even if all of them swung, to switch control. But then there's a pretty big chunk in the 60 to 65 range, which wouldn't really lose on a 10-point swing, but would become threatened on a 20-point swing, let alone a 27 or 8-point swing. So again, we're a long ways from November, but that's why this is a strong signal to both parties.
Well, all this talk about the base, President Trump's base, the Democrats' base. What's your gut tell you? Is President Trump's base more energized and activated than the Democrats, or the Democrats?
This is a complicated issue. In Virginia and Alabama, the areas, the counties and wards that voted most for Trump showed the biggest fall off in turnout. while the most Democratic areas maintained their turnout the best. But here in the 10th, I don't see any relationship in turnout at the ward level for the 100 wards or so in the 10th. I don't see any relationship between turnout and support for Trump. So I don't know if that's just one particular case here or whether this relationship that we've seen elsewhere may start to show itself when we look at a statewide race here.
Do you think, how much do you think, JR, we're going to hear about his plan to close the juvenile prisons up north? Does he want to take a victory lap on that? Because that's a long way from being approved.
I think it'll be, he's going to have a list of calls to lawmakers. So like he wants this done, healthcare done, all that might be part of the call. And to be what Charles was saying, Republicans feel a little bit better in the last week about polling they've seen on the tax package. The generic ballot also is narrowed a little bit, maybe because of the shutdown. Now the shutdown can be forgotten in a week. I mean, the number of controversies I see out of D.C. are astounding at this point. So I don't know the retention rate that voters have about big problems. But if there's another big shutdown in February, if it becomes a legal immigration versus the military, that could hurt Democrats. There are all kinds of variables between now and November that I don't know what's going to happen. And it could be a wipeout for Republicans. It could fight back to being just a normal midterm election. Things don't go that well.
It's not directly on point with the state of the state, Charles, but what is your historical polling showed on the issue that JR just raised, immigration? Immigration
is a substantial majority favor some path to either citizenship or at least permanent legal residence.
What does substantial mean?
Substantial means well into the 60% favor that. Those favoring expulsion from the country are down in the 20s or 30s. That's true in our Wisconsin data. We've asked it a lot of times, and it's also very similar in national data. As always, the question is, well, how do you get there? What's the policy? And Congress has failed to find a route that would let them adopt something that's fairly popular, when within the Republican Party, of course, there's a lot of sense that that's amnesty rather than an earned path to citizenship. So it's a political challenge there.
Do you see how much, if any, political fallout do you see from the Me Too movement? Is that showing up on your...
that has really just exploded since our last poll. So we have not polled on sexual harassment. What we are seeing in national data is the gender gap growing a little bit, the number of women in particular saying that they either have experienced harassment or know someone who has is pretty substantial. Is this something that really will stay with us into the fall election and be part of the fall campaign? I think it could. There's the question of whether with each additional outrageous scandal, do we simply become numbed to it and the issue kind of goes down, or does it continue to build, and who's willing to embrace a policy approach or a campaign approach to the issue?
JR, the practical side of that for you, are you seeing evidence that more women plan to run for the ledge?
Concrete evidence, no. I keep asking for a list of candidates. They don't want to give them to me yet because they want to keep those guys in wraps, but I mean, they found a woman to run in the 10th Senate District for a reason. They found a candidate who fits the district. Democrats have kind of had a fallback of a teacher as a candidate or an administrator for a long time from schools, trying to tap into the education issue. They may have realized that hasn't been the best tact. Here's somebody who rides Harleys, is a bear hunter in her spare time, St. Clair County medical examiner from the right part of the district. It's not just about a wave coming. They have to have a good candidate and a good message. And talking to some Democrats last week, they hope the caucuses have that sink in, that Patty Shockner is the ideal kind of fit. There should be litmus tests. Find the person who fits the district, and it gives them a chance then. Some places that maybe are 54% Republican, but in a wave year, the right candidate, right message, open seat could make it an option.
We mentioned maybe transportation funding and the impasse is something that we won't hear a lot about in the state of the state. Any other issue that he may shy away from?
Well, you mentioned the youth prison, and I think that's one that's a little complicated because it's been a problem. He hasn't been active on it, at least in a public, visible way, until recently, and now a sudden rush to address that. I would think he's probably going to talk about that. But how much, I'm not currently sure. You know, the one we haven't talked about is university funding.
Yes.
UW.
Yes.
Where his freeze on tuition has been fairly popular in our polling, though cuts to the UW budget have been unpopular. And so it's an interesting division between folks that would like to see their tuition kept lower and therefore approve of the freeze, but are concerned about the level of funding for it.
Well, you mentioned funding for higher education, and we did get a Facebook question on that, which led me to this research, again, from the Wisconsin Policy Forum. Aid to our tech colleges, the last year of the Doyle administration, $136 million. Last year, fiscal year, under Governor Walker, 6 years later, $519 million. So that's gone up like by a factor of 3 or 4.
Right.
What does that tell you?
In part, it fits with the governor's talk about employment, providing job opportunities, especially for people without a college degree. And I think the tech college system is well suited to do that and seems to produce real benefits for what I'll call blue-collar employment, but it's hard to define exactly what blue-collar means because many of these are skilled technical jobs of various kinds, but they don't require 4 years. So I think that has been a fairly popular program, though it maybe doesn't always rise to the top level of attention. Between K-12 and UW, the tech schools may not get as much overt attention as they might otherwise.
And this goes along with the governor saying you don't need a 4-year degree from a public education.
That's right. And a lot of the older manufacturing that we have in the state doesn't necessarily need those 4-year degrees.
Okay, we're only a few minutes away from the governor starting to speak. Maybe my last question, or next to last. JR, does the public care about who leads the elections and ethics commissions?
I've had people tell me no, so I don't know. If you go to name ID, I don't think that Brian Bell and Mike House have any name ID in Wisconsin. The question for Democrats is, can they craft into a message of they are trying to create a swamp in Madison, that they're part of a corruption or something like that? Maybe they can break through, but as far as like an ad just on that issue, I don't know that I see that happening.
Charles, we're almost out of time.
Yeah, I think the salience of those issues, which are of great importance, nevertheless are so low for the general public that it's hard to do. If there's a message crafted of this is part of grabbing control of nonpartisan institutions, which you yourselves just changed in the last few years,
yes,
maybe that comes up, but at the moment I think not.
Okay, then the last question is, the one thing you're going to look for in this speech?
I really want to hear how he lays out the vision for the future. He's got a laundry list of things. One of the things that State of the Unions and State of the State sometimes fail on is they lay out such a laundry list that nothing really stands out. Does he manage to nail one or two primary things that he wants to drive home, or do we kind of lose it?
Same question, JR.
My focus is after the speech. What do Robin Voss and Scott Field say they will do before they leave in mid-March?
That's our preview of the Governor Scott Walker's 8th State of the State. I want to thank Charles Franklin and J.R. Ross. Now let's listen to that State of the State speech. The governor is about to start speaking.
At this time, it is my honor to introduce the governor of the great state of Wisconsin, the Honorable Scott Walker.
Speaker Voss, Speaker Pro Tem August, President Ross, Majority Leader Fitzgerald, Minority Leader Schilling, Minority Leader Hinz, Supreme Court justices, constitutional officers, tribal leaders, members of the cabinet, members of the legislature, distinguished guests, and most importantly, fellow citizens of Wisconsin. It is an honor to come before you this afternoon to report on the state of our great state. Before we start, I want to recognize the First Lady of Wisconsin, my wife, Tonette, and our two sons, Matt and Alex. Last year, as you might remember, Tonette joined me at this podium to talk about her groundbreaking work called Fostering Futures. She and her team continue their efforts with tribal councils, county governments, nonprofits, colleges and universities, and employers from across Wisconsin. Our state agencies have been trained on how to incorporate trauma-informed care into their daily routines. She brought together a group of first spouses and staff to Wisconsin to talk about this important work, and she went to Washington to get the federal government more involved in this area. Tonette, I want to thank you for your leadership that will change the lives of children, adults, and families all over Wisconsin. Next to my wife is Major General Donald Dunbar, who, as you know, is the Adjutant General of the 10,000 strong men and women of the Wisconsin National Guard. Thank you for your service, General Dunbar. And next to him, this is a great treat this year, next to him is Major General Mark Anderson. It was my privilege to administer the oath earlier this month to our second two-star general. What an honor for Wisconsin. Congratulations, General Anderson. In September, General Dunbar, Chief Master Sergeant Thomas Safer, and I had the opportunity to visit members of the 115th Fighter Wing from right here in Madison while they were deployed in Kusan Air Base in South Korea. Commanding Officer Bart Van Roo, who's with us, who I actually had the chance to fly in with an F-16 years ago, he and 255 airmen were deployed to one of the most intense spots in the world, South Korea. Now, while we were there, I met the commander of the 7th Air Force, Lieutenant General Thomas Bergson. By the way, he's a 1981 graduate of Wisconsin Rapids High School. He told me of the incredible skill of our airmen and women. And as if that wasn't enough, the commander of the 115th, Colonel Eric Peterson, and many of the remarkable men and women of the Wisconsin National Guard joined me last month as we announced that Wisconsin had been selected to host the brand new F-35A Lightning II fighter jets right here at Truex Field. Out of all the states in America, we had the #1 location. I'm looking forward to hearing the F-35s take off because you know what? That's the sound of freedom. Congratulations to these outstanding men and women, many of whom are with us here today. I'm proud to declare that the state of our state, well, it's historically strong. In Wisconsin, employment is at historic highs, and unemployment is at historic lows. We invested more actual dollars into schools than ever before in our history. The state property tax is gone. Wisconsin received a bond rating upgrade from 3 national agencies. Our healthcare systems are ranked #1 in the nation for quality. And we announced the largest economic development project in state history. It has been an amazing year, a historic year. We are getting positive things done for the people of Wisconsin. As mentioned, more people are employed in Wisconsin than ever before in the history of our state. And just last week, the Department of Workforce Development announced that the unemployment rate had dropped to 3%. The only other time it was that low was in May, June, and July of 1999 when Tommy Thompson was our governor. You know, things were pretty good back then. They're pretty good now, and they're only going to get better. We are getting positive things done for the people of Wisconsin. Students in our schools have some of the highest ACT scores and some of the best graduation rates in the country. And we just invested more actual dollars into K-12 education than ever before. An extra $200 for every student in every school in every part of our state this year, and another $204 increase for every student on top of that next year. Our children deserve a great education that prepares them for college, careers, and real life. We are getting positive things done for the people of Wisconsin. To make college more affordable for students and working families, we froze University of Wisconsin tuition for all undergraduates from our state for 6 years in a row. We're partnering with financial institutions to help graduates refinance student loans. And financial assistance for students in need, well, it's at an all-time high, making higher education possible for thousands of students at colleges and universities across the state. We are getting positive things done for the people of Wisconsin. We were able to make record investments in education while still continuing to reduce the burden on hardworking taxpayers. According to the Nonpartisan Legislative Fiscal Bureau, both property and income taxes will be lower in 2018 than they were in 2010. And we eliminated, that's right, we eliminated the state property tax. That's right, 100% of the property taxpayers in our state saw a 100% reduction in their state property tax bills. We are getting positive things done for the people of Wisconsin. Healthcare systems in our state rank #1 in the nation for quality, according to the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. Plus, everyone living in poverty is now covered under Badger Care for the first time in the history of the state. And according to the U.S. Census Bureau, the percentage of people with access to health coverage in Wisconsin is now one of the best in the nation. We are getting positive things done for the people of Wisconsin. Wisconsin is #1 in cheese, cranberries, and ginseng. We're one of the top states for milk, corn, soybeans, beef, apples, cherries, potatoes, and vegetables. Heck, I'm just getting hungry thinking about that. Agriculture is a big part of our economy, and for our farm families, it's more than that. It's a way of life. We are getting positive things done for the people of Wisconsin. No state in the nation provides more benefits for veterans than Wisconsin. We offer 23 benefits for our veterans, while the next closest state offers 21. Our veterans can attend college tuition-free, and we expanded eligibility, so more of our veteran spouses and families can too. And U.S. News and World Report reports our veterans' homes are among the best in the country. We are getting positive things done for the people of Wisconsin. More people working than ever before. Unemployment is at historic low. Record investments in our kids' education. More help for our colleges and universities. Lower taxes, quality health care, growing agriculture and industry, taking care of our veterans. Yeah, we're getting things done. We are getting positive things done for the people of Wisconsin. But as you might recall, that wasn't always the case. 8 years ago, things were much different. The state was headed in the wrong direction. Instead of going forwards, the state was going backwards. 8 years ago, in January of 2010, the unemployment rate was 9.2%. Today, the unemployment rate is down to 3%. That is well below the national rate of 4.1%. And as I mentioned before, it is tied for the lowest unemployment rate in the history of Wisconsin. In fact, more people are working in Wisconsin than ever before. People like Brooke and Cliff from Magnesian Healthcare in Fond du Lac, and Sarah from iButtonLink Technology in Whitewater. Brooke, Cliff, and Sarah all became employed through our Wisconsin Fast Forward Worker Training Program during the past year. Eight years ago, the state government created a $3.6 billion budget deficit. The previous governor and legislature raided from the Transportation Fund, the Patient Compensation Fund. Heck, they even missed a payment to Minnesota for tax reciprocity. Today, the state ended the last fiscal year with a more than $500 million surplus, and the nonpartisan Legislative Fiscal Bureau just predicted that we will end the current budget with an even larger surplus than first projected. Our pension is fully funded, and the rainy day fund is 168 times bigger than when we took office. Wisconsin's long-term outstanding debt is one of the lowest, meaning one of the best in the nation. We're paying off our obligations faster than we take on debt. And 3 national agencies upgraded our bond rating this past year. For Moody's, that was the first time since 1973. For Fitch and Kroll, it's the first time ever. That's historic. This is yet more proof that our financial management is working. – We invested more than $6 billion into the transportation system in our recent state budget, which brings our total investment to $24 billion over 8 years. That's $3 billion more than what former Governor Jim Doyle spent on transportation over the same period of time. You heard that right. We invested $3 billion more into transportation than Jim Doyle did during the same amount of time. In our budget, the increases we gave to local governments to fix roads, to repair bridges, and to fill potholes are some of the largest in 20 years. We also put large amounts into state highway rehab. And thanks to the diligent work of Secretary Dave Ross and his team, who found savings, we are able to move up projects like Interstate 3990 and Wisconsin 441 while still keeping major projects like Verona Road on time. Overall, these savings will move up 26 projects. Projects like Highway 18 from Dodgeville to Mount Horeb, Highway 45 in Shawano County, Highway 16 from La Crosse to Sparta, and Highway 172 in Brown County. Eight years ago, according to the Nonpartisan Legislative Fiscal Bureau, the previous governor and legislature actually cut funding for schools and local governments. I remember it well because I was a county official at the time, and the state did not give us the tools to deal with the reduction in state aid. Many local leaders either had to lay off workers or cut services. Today, we made the largest investment of actual dollars into K-12 education in history, an increase of $200 for every student in every school in every part of the state this year, and another $204 increase on top of that next year. Plus, we gave schools extra resources to cover transportation costs, to add mental health services, and to put new technology in the classroom. And the reforms we passed years ago have saved school districts, local and state governments more than $5 billion and counting, according to an independent review. Most importantly, they allow school leaders to staff based on merit and pay based on performance. That means they can put the best and the brightest in the classroom and pay them to be there. You see, putting more money into schools is good, but making sure it goes into improving the quality of education for students in classrooms, well, that's priceless. I'm proud to say that that is what we're doing right here in Wisconsin. Eight years ago, there were only 1,611 youth apprenticeship students in Wisconsin. Today, the number of youth apprenticeship students has more than doubled, as has financial support from the state. And state funding for high technology workshops called Fab Labs doubled in this past budget. You see, we are giving our students a head start on outstanding careers. 8 years ago, tuition went up for college students in the University of Wisconsin system. In fact, during the decade before our freeze, UW tuition went up a whopping 118%. Today we froze tuition for all undergraduates from Wisconsin for 6 years in a row. We did that to make college more affordable for students and working families. Now, the Nonpartisan Legislative Fiscal Bureau estimates the average student saved more than $6,300 over 4 years thanks to the freeze. That is real money. 8 years ago, there were actually people living in poverty who were on a waiting list for access to health coverage under Badger Care. Today, for the first time in the history of the state, everyone living in poverty is covered under Badger Care. Because of our unique Wisconsin-based solution, we had, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation, no gap in coverage. And we rank as one of the top states in the nation for access to health care coverage, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Hard to believe, but 8 years ago, there were about 4,000 people with disabilities, including both children and adults, who were on waiting lists for long-term care services. Plus, many counties were not included in the long-term care programs. This year, we are expanding family care and IRIS to every part of the state to provide long-term care options for senior citizens and for people with disabilities, to allow them to live as independently as possible. Today, I am happy to report to you that by the end of this year, we will eliminate wait lists for children who need long-term care services in every county in the state. Ending wait lists for long-term care services means children like 14-year-old Malik of Kenosha finally gets the support that they need. Malik lives with cerebral palsy and autism and has limited mobility. After 2 years on the wait list, today, Malik gets in-home therapy. He has a modified bathroom that gives him more independence, and his family gets much-needed respite services. His mother says all of this has been a game changer. Malik and his mother are here with us tonight. Access to long-term care services also means freedom for people like Mick and Helen in Green Bay. At 91 years young, Mick fell and broke his leg, but he was able to return home to his wife of 70 years thanks to the services and equipment he receives under family care. Helen, his wife, calls the woman who comes to their apartment to help with their daily task her visiting angel. Ending wait lists for long-term care also helps people like Melissa in Sauk City. Melissa was born with a disorder that affected her cognitive development. And after high school, she landed her dream job at Spa Kalahari. But she doesn't drive, and transportation was an issue. Through her long-term care services in the IRIS program, Melissa gets help with transportation and other home care services, which has helped improve her life. She's around here somewhere, right? There you are. Now, people like Malik, Mick, and Melissa should not have to put their lives on hold to get the help that they need to be independent and to live their best lives. These are success stories, and I am glad that these services will be available all over the state. Since 2011, Wisconsin has been recognized as a national leader on helping people with disabilities enter the workforce. Today, according to the annual Disability Statistics Compendium, we rank in the top 10 states for hiring people with disabilities. That's good news for people like Marcus. He was one of the first interns in Project Search at Children's Hospital, Wisconsin. After graduation, Marcus was hired full-time by the hospital. See, Project Search is a program that helps high school-age students with disabilities prepare to enter the workforce. And I love going to their graduations. It's one of the most inspirational things you can do. The success rate for Project Search in Wisconsin is 88%, which makes it one of the best in the entire country. Eight years ago, there was just one program site for Project Search in this state. When school starts in the fall, there will be 27 sites across the state of Wisconsin. Eight years ago, Governor Doyle had closed all 8 of the visitor centers around the state. Today, we've seen a 35% increase in the economic impact of tourism. Our marketing focuses not on a slogan, but on the fun. That's right, the fun people have in Wisconsin. We partnered with local convention and visitors bureaus and chambers of commerce to open visitor centers all across the state. Check out TravelWisconsin.com for more details. Is that pretty good, Stephanie? She'd like it even more if I repeated it. TravelWisconsin.com. 8 years ago, the state government did not have any state-funded grant programs for the expansion of broadband infrastructure. Today we do. And in this last budget, we invested $41.5 million, an increase of over $35 million to connect communities across the state to high-speed internet connections, as well as give schools access to the latest technology and training. Our goal is to connect every part of the state of Wisconsin over the next 2 years. In 2007, the economic impact of agriculture was estimated at $59.2 billion by UW Extension. Today, a report by that same UW Extension estimates that agriculture has an $88 billion impact on the Wisconsin economy. Lower property and agriculture taxes, science-based and predictable regulations, limits on frivolous lawsuits, and expanded export opportunities will help our family farmers continue to grow in 2018 and beyond. Eight years ago, taxes were going up. In fact, during the decade before we took office, property taxes alone went up 27%. I remember it back then. People were telling me about how they felt that they were being taxed out of their homes. Today, both property and income taxes are actually lower than they were in 2010. Property taxes on a median value of home are estimated to be more than $100 lower in 2018 than they were 8 years before. And think about this. If the previous trend had continued from before I took office, the estimated property tax bills on a typical home in Wisconsin would be $612 higher than they were this year. And for the first time since 1931, there is no state property tax. In fact, property taxes as a percentage of personal income are now the lowest that they have been since the end of World War II. Plus, we cut income taxes. So get this, a typical family will have saved $1,400 since 2010. The overall state and local tax burden in Wisconsin, once one of the highest in the country, is now below the national average. Based on data from the U.S. Census Bureau, it is the lowest it has been in more than 50 years. 50 years. Through the end of this budget, the cumulative impact of our savings to the hard-working taxpayers of Wisconsin will exceed $8 billion. That's right, $8 billion. Only 2 other states in the entire country have reduced their tax burden more than we have since 2011. 8 years ago, according to Chief Executive Magazine, Wisconsin ranked 41st for business. Sadly, the state was consistently in the bottom 10 for places to do business in. Today, for the first time in the history of the survey, Wisconsin ranks in the top 10 states for business. That's why global businesses like Haribo and Foxconn are coming to Wisconsin. It is why Fleet Farm is expanding in Chippewa Falls. Generac is growing in Waukesha. U.S. Venture is expanding in Appleton. Quick Trip is building in La Crosse. Great Lakes Cheese Company is adding jobs in Wausau. Ameriquip is growing in Kiel. iMark Molding is adding jobs in Woodville. And Oshkosh Corporation is expanding, well, of course, in Oshkosh. You like that? There's a joke in there somewhere, but I'm going to take a pass. Thanks to the many employees from these companies who are here with us tonight. And you know what? We're just getting started. Foxconn, for example, will begin construction this year on a $10 billion campus. This will require some 10,000 construction workers from all over the state. Earth movers from Hoffman Construction out of Black River Falls are already starting work on the infrastructure for this major project. Families, workers, and companies from across the state will benefit from one of the largest economic development projects in the history of America. Once operational, Foxconn will spend roughly $1.4 billion a year with Wisconsin businesses. Now, to put that in perspective, Oshkosh Corporation, one of our great Wisconsin employers, a company that just won the coolest thing made in Wisconsin contest, they spend about $300 million each year with Wisconsin-based companies. Foxconn will spend more than 4 times as much. That's a big deal. And if you're a small business that would like to be a part of the Foxconn team, I invite you to sign up on the website, WISupplyChainMarketplace.com. Most importantly, Foxconn will be one more reason to keep our graduates here in the state. Young people like Amber, who's a student at Gateway Technical College, Joey and Tim, who attend Madison College, and Eric, who's a student at Fox Valley Technical College. They and many others like them all have plans to be a part of the 13,000 people working on the Foxconn team. Thank you for being such a visible reminder of the employers that are growing here in the state of Wisconsin. Eight years ago, things were not very good in our state. There were double-digit tax increases, billion-dollar budget deficits, and record job loss. State aid to schools and local governments were cut with no tools provided. UW tuition was continuing to go up faster than inflation, and Wisconsin consistently ranked in the bottom 10 states for businesses. We don't want to go back to those days. That would be a giant step backwards. Thankfully, many of us in this chamber today had the courage to make some tough decisions. The results from those tough decisions helped turn our state around. These results now allow us to invest record amounts into our schools and to other priorities while still making Wisconsin more affordable for the hard-working taxpayers of this state. Now we need to keep moving Wisconsin forward. So today, I'm laying out an ambitious agenda for 2018 to keep us headed in the right direction. First, to ensure that every child across this state has access to a great education, we're going to find additional ways to put more resources into the classroom. A good school equals a great life, and we have some of the best schools in the country. We will build off of our historic investments into K-12 education. Looking ahead, we need to continue to help rural schools help keep more money in the classroom. Now, many of these schools have unique needs related to transportation and to the size of the district. I want to ensure educational excellence everywhere. With that in mind, we have a plan that will increase sparsity aid and a plan to help out low-revenue school districts. Today, I want to personally thank the co-chair of the Joint Finance Committee, John Nygren, for his leadership, as well as Senator Howard Markline and Representative Jeff Mursell for working together on this. And today, I call on the members of the state legislature to pass this plan. Second, we need to grow the number of opportunities for our young people to pursue great careers right here in our state. Together, we developed a plan with the Wisconsin Technical College system, the University of Wisconsin system, and with private colleges and universities across Wisconsin. With all the new jobs being created in our state, we must have enough graduates with the skills to fill these careers. Today, I propose that we use the $20 million designated in Act 58 to establish a new Wisconsin Career Creator program on campuses all over the state. Now, you remember years ago, we had brain drain, and that was really a problem. Now, with all the exciting new jobs and developments, there are many, many more reasons to keep our graduates right here in Wisconsin. Now, that's what I call brain gain. Tonette and I love the fact that our sons, Matt and Alex, work here in the state. We know how nice it is to have family close to home. We want that for other families as well. You see, education and training are the keys to building a strong workforce. We also increased opportunities for people with physical and intellectual disabilities in the workforce. Plus, our most recent budget included a major increase in funding for vocational training within the correctional system. And we are aggressively working to get veterans into the workforce. Still, we need to increase the number of potential employees in the state. With more people working than ever before, we cannot afford to have anyone on the sidelines. Therefore, as the third point in our ambitious agenda, I propose that we expand our Wisconsin Works for Everyone welfare reforms. Since we started requiring employment and worker training, more than 25,000 people have gained employment. People like Thomas from Stevens Point and Charlotte from Beloit. Thomas had been working a series of seasonal jobs. With our training program, he now has a permanent job with MedExcel at St. Michael's and Stevens Point. And the great part is he says it's his dream job. Charlotte had health issues that forced her out of a job. Through our program, she got the help she needed and was hired almost immediately to work in registration at Beloit Health System. These are just a few of the success stories of the more than 25,000 people who are in the workforce because of our work to transition more people from government dependence to independence, true independence through the dignity of work. Still, we need more individuals in the workforce. Each week, we typically have 80,000 to 100,000 job openings on our state website, jobcenterwisconsin.com. In fact, that phone must be opportunity ringing right there. With that in mind, I'm calling a special session to pass our common sense welfare reform plan. We want able-bodied working-age adults to work at least 30 hours a week or to enroll in job training to get assistance in our state. We want to expand welfare reform statewide, and we want to ensure that everyone getting public assistance can pass a drug test. Now, here's the important part. If someone fails, we set aside resources to get them into rehabilitation because we understand that if we get them healthy, we can find a job for anyone in the state. We also propose putting asset limits on public assistance so people with giant mansions and fancy cars don't get welfare checks while hardworking taxpayers like you have to pay the bills. While many are upset with the inability to get things done in Washington, we are getting positive things done for the people of Wisconsin. I want to thank Speaker Robin Vos and Senator Chris Kapenga for leading on this issue and working with us on welfare reform. Now, some, maybe even in this Capitol, will complain that our reforms are about making it harder to get government assistance. The truth is, our reforms are about making it easier to get a job. For those who are able, we will enable them to find meaningful work. We want to help people pursue careers to support themselves and their families. You see, public assistance should be more like a trampoline and less like a hammock. Just like Tommy Thompson did in the 1990s, when unemployment was low and times were good, we are moving people from welfare into the workforce. Fourth, I want to ask the members of the legislature here to pass our small business plan to help even more employers grow across the state. The first step is reducing costs for small businesses. Lower taxes, streamlining regulations, and reducing frivolous lawsuits are all a part of the plan. There's still more that's being done this session on ending welfare, or on unemployment fraud and on lawsuit reform. Let's get it done. The next step for small business is preparing the workforce. Our plans include investments in schools, apprenticeships, higher education, and worker training. Another step for small businesses is removing barriers to work. The plan includes ending benefit cliffs to encourage more people to work, take more hours, and advance into higher wage jobs. It also includes work requirements and screening we just talked about for drug use for welfare benefits, as well as adding new populations to the workforce. The final step of our plan for small business is to help attract new talent. I ask for your assistance, the assistance of this legislature, as we seek to attract to Wisconsin several key groups of potential employees: transitioning veterans and their families, graduates of Wisconsin colleges and universities, and millennials from across the Midwest. For more details on our small business plan, please visit our website, walker.wi.gov. We are committed to helping small businesses grow in every part of Wisconsin. We recently made a major announcement in terms of investments into our ethnic chambers of commerce to help grow minority-owned businesses, small businesses in particular in the state. We continue to partner with local chambers, with county economic development entities, and with regional economic development organizations to grow small businesses and to ensure that there are more small businesses that succeed in the rural parts of our state. I propose today that we create a rural economic development fund of $50 million per year. This fund will support the development of new businesses and the expansion of small businesses in rural areas. And it can assist in training more people to fill the positions being created by employers in rural areas. On top of that, many of the small businesses in our rural communities support and depend on our farm families. To keep more of our family dairy farms, I propose a plan that will create a family farm fund. This fund will provide scholarships to encourage students to take advantage of agriculture-related studies at a Wisconsin Technical College or at the University of Wisconsin College of Agriculture. We believe that will help them begin a rewarding career in farming. Our plan will also help farmers deal with the cost of ensuring that their farming practices preserve clean water in rural areas. We also recognize that farmers are facing challenges with low commodity prices. That's why earlier today, I signed an executive order to Ag Day that expands resources for farmers to reach new markets across the country and around the world. We also need to do more to connect people and businesses in rural areas to high-speed internet connections. As mentioned, we made a major new investment in broadband access grants for communities and in teach grants for schools and students. But we can do more. That's why I'm calling on the Federal Communications Commission to finalize rules increasing access to broadband internet by advancing television white space technology. White space technology is the unused spectrum between broadcast television stations, and it can deliver high-speed internet to underserved areas of Wisconsin. Each of these items will help grow small businesses here in this Wisconsin. Therefore, I ask for the members of this legislature to act on these items that require legislative approval before the end of the session. Our ambitious agenda also includes our work to reform state government, to make it more effective, more efficient, and more accountable. We will continue to challenge the status quo. With that in mind, we're pushing a major reform of the criminal justice system for serious juvenile offenders. Over the past year, we worked with county officials, members of the judiciary, policy experts, and lawmakers from both political parties. We looked at best practices in states like Missouri and elsewhere to see how to reform the system here in Wisconsin. Thank you to Secretary John Litcher and Secretary Linda Seemeyer for their work and that of their incredible teams. Instead of one or two large facilities, which has been the model in Wisconsin for decades, our reform plan will create 6 smaller facilities spread throughout the state. Locations for 5 of the sites would be determined by collaborating with the 72 counties, since the offenders are sent to state facilities from individual counties. The other facility would be right here at Mendota Mental Health Institute as part of the nationally recognized program for mental health treatment. The complex in Lincoln County would be converted to a medium security adult prison. It would likely focus on alcohol and drug abuse treatment. The additional space would also help limit the amount of money the Department of Corrections has to pay for contract beds outside of the system. Now, the Department of Corrections has made many changes over the past few years to improve safety and treatment. These include additional positions, increased compensation, changes in medicine distribution, and more security cameras. The changes I'm talking about today, however, are much larger than that, and they are really about long-term reform of the system. Today, I ask the members of the state legislature to act on this plan by the end of the session. I particularly want to thank Representative Evan Goyke for his work on these reforms. Much of our plan, I should say, parallels his work. He is now, as I understand, amending portions of that to include our additions to mental health and trauma-informed care. So let's work together. Let's work with the counties to pass this plan quickly so we can move forward with real reform in the system. Now, just like families all across the state have had to do over the past 8 or 9 years, we had to make some tough decisions. And you know what? They paid off. Our reforms are working. The economy is growing, and Wisconsin has a sizable surplus. As promised, when we have a surplus, we will give it back to you, the hardworking taxpayers. You see, this is your reform dividend. You deserve it. First I had a phone, now I have kids. How do I get to compete with all that, right? Come on up, guys. So today, I propose that we create a child tax credit here in the state of Wisconsin. So we're going to create a new Wisconsin child tax credit. Families from across the state will receive $100 for every child under 18 living at home. A couple $100 more in the family budget could really make a difference, particularly when getting ready for the next school year. It could be a new pair of shoes, a winter coat, activity fees at school, or maybe a copay at the doctor or the dentist office. We know sometimes Wisconsin families face challenges when making ends meet, and this new child tax credit, well, we think it can help. Today, I'm joined by families from all over Wisconsin who will benefit from our child tax credit. So today, I ask you, the members of the state legislature, to pass our plan so that by the time these kids and all the others like them across the state begin school this fall, their parents will receive a check in the mailbox. I had 2. I can only imagine what it's like to have all these kids together, right? The final part of our ambitious agenda for 2018 is providing stability in healthcare. Our citizens are crying out for a stable healthcare system. And you know what? Washington has failed to act, so it is time for us to lead in Wisconsin. That is why today I propose the creation of a health care stability plan. Most people receive their health care coverage from their employer, and premium increases for the majority of employer-based plans were fairly modest this past year at about 5%. The biggest concern I hear about as I travel the state is from those who are worried about pre-existing conditions. With this in mind, I propose that we enact a law in Wisconsin that will guarantee coverage of pre-existing conditions. Now, this part is serious. That way, someone who has cancer or another serious disease or ailment will not have to worry about obtaining or keeping coverage. The members of the State Assembly have already moved forward on this process. Now I ask the members of the State Senate to do the same. This will provide comfort and stability for people all across Wisconsin. For our senior citizens, people like my parents who are watching at home, hi, Mom, most receive their health care coverage through Medicare. While this is a federal and not a state program, we can provide certainty and stability for those who depend on senior care. In the past, there's been plenty of debate about whether this should be a federal or a state government responsibility. It is clear that the people want it at the state level. Therefore, I am officially seeking a permanent waiver for the state of Wisconsin to provide senior care. Since it was first approved in 2002, the state has asked for an extension of senior care 4 times. It is time to make this a permanent and stable program. And for the small number of people who seek coverage through the individual market, and not through their employer or through Medicaid or Medicare, I propose that the state provide assistance to keep those premiums from making health care coverage unreachable for many of our fellow citizens. Under Obamacare, the so-called Affordable Care Act, premiums for people in the individual market are going up an average of 36% this year. Some are seeing much larger premium increases. For example, Christine from Brown County saw her premiums go up by, get this, almost $2,000 a month. A month. That's about a 120% increase. That is unsustainable and unacceptable. Thankfully, our health care stability plan will help keep premiums at a reasonable level here in Wisconsin. This is a market-driven approach to bring stability to health care in Wisconsin. Just as we did years ago, when we found a unique way to cover everyone living in poverty for the first time in Wisconsin history, we have a unique way to help drive down premiums. And you know what? This is not a Republican or a Democrat issue. It is a Wisconsin issue. We listened to the people and created a Wisconsin solution. As Minnesota Governor Mark Dayton said, in the past, the Affordable Care Act is no longer affordable. Instead of seeking to put thousands more people onto government assistance through the Obamacare expansion, our plan helps drive down premiums to make health insurance plans more affordable, and we believe it will lead to more choices for consumers across the state. Our health care stability plan is the Wisconsin way to provide stability and peace of mind for our citizens. Along with coverage of general health care needs, we must continue to find new ways to fight the opioid and illegal drug addiction crisis in this state. Since I've been governor, it's been my honor to have signed 28 pieces of legislation with broad bipartisan support, so thanks to you all. 28 pieces of legislation to law dealing with this challenge. I particularly want... Thanks again to Representative Nygren for putting together such a broad-based coalition to fight this epidemic and for joining with our outstanding Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Kleefisch as the co-chair of our commission. We signed 2 executive orders regarding this last Friday, and today I ask you to pass the latest recommendation from this panel of experts. We know that if we get people treatment, or better yet, keep them from addiction in the first place, It will not only create a healthier Wisconsin, but a happier one too. And that will help us build the workforce we need to keep moving Wisconsin forward. Sadly, as so many of us know, this is one of those issues that knows no boundaries. Rich or poor, big city or small town, Republican or Democrat. These are the issues that people want us to work together on. Issues like pushing for more ways to help our schools improve student success, growing the number of opportunities for our young people to pursue great careers that will keep them here in our state, expanding our Wisconsin Works for Everyone welfare reforms, helping small businesses grow across the state, continuing to reform our government, creating a new child tax credit to help working families, and providing stability in health care. These issues are the 7 common sense principles of our ambitious agenda for 2018. You see, we're getting positive things done for the people of Wisconsin, but there is still more work to be done. So today, I ask you, the members of the Wisconsin State Legislature, to move forward on these important issues. As I said before, these are not Republican or Democrat issues. These are just Wisconsin issues. Plus, I know that we can work together. Many at home might be surprised to hear this, but more than 90% of the bills that I have signed into law were passed with more than just Republican votes. Let me repeat that so you heard that right. More than 90% of the laws that I've signed as your governor had more than just votes from Republican lawmakers. I say that because I know we can work together to get things done, because we've done it in the past, and you can do it again this year. And I ask you, the people of Wisconsin watching us at home, on TV, or on the internet, or wherever you're looking at it, I ask you to talk to your lawmakers and ask for rapid action on this ambitious agenda for 2018. I'm confident that you will, because I've seen you do positive things all over the state. See, one of my great joys as your governor is traveling the state of Wisconsin and visiting with so many wonderful citizens. I love to see the people of Wisconsin. Through our visits, I see how proud you are. I see how proud you are of your families, of your homes, of your work. I see how proud you are of your small businesses and farms. I see how proud you are of your schools and your churches and places of worship. I see how proud you are of your communities, and as I travel the state, I see how proud you are of our state. We are Wisconsin proud. Today, I want you to know that I'm proud to be your governor. I'm proud of the work that we've done here. I'm proud of the progress we've made together. I'm proud that we are getting positive things done for the people of Wisconsin. But you know what? We're not done yet. So let's get going. Let's get working together. Let's keep moving Wisconsin forward. Thank you. May God bless you. May God bless the great state of Wisconsin. May God bless our service members across the world. And may God continue to bless the United States of America.
The representative from the 5th Assembly District, Representative Steinecke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Wisconsin heard play in Oshkosh, we had a part in building. There's a lot of concrete that goes into those, okay? And not to mention Highway 41, Highway 441, the zoo interchange. In terms of transportation, the state of Wisconsin is doing a lot of very good things. We've talked a lot about negative things in terms of helping transportation, building transportation, but we got to bear in mind that we also have done a lot of very good things when it comes to transportation in this state. I believe this bill needs to be part of a broader scope, you know, not just this specific bill, but also dealing with the tech schools, the UW, showing off what Wisconsin could do for training, teaching, developing people to being part of this state. Not to mention the unemployment, the work search, all the different